So I'm Nick Sireau. I am the father of two children with an ultra-rare disease called alkaptonuria, or AKU for short, and I run a charity called the AKU Society, which is based in Cambridge and which works very closely with a team of scientists and clinicians in Liverpool to develop a treatment for this particular disease. We noticed that something was wrong basically a couple of weeks after we brought Julian back from the clinic after he was born, and we noticed that his nappies were going red-black, and we were using some washable nappies to try and be kind of eco-friendly, and they were going red-black, and so we were quite alarmed. And it was a Sunday evening, so the GP and all that was closed, so we called up the emergency doctor, who came along, and he tested for blood in the urine and didn't find any. And then he said it was probably my wife eating some red cabbage that day, which had somehow, some dye had got through into the breast milk, into the child and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't really believe that, and so we sent him off. And the following day we went to see our GP, who was very good. She sent off for a whole bunch of tests, and eventually some tests came back from Great Ormond Street Hospital showing that Julian had this ultra-rare disease called alkaptonuria. So the process from realising there was a problem to when we got a diagnosis probably took about 6 months, and actually that's not too bad, because we have some patients we're in touch with where it took them 50 years to get a diagnosis. There's one particular patient who was in his 60s, and he got diagnosed 3 days before he actually died. He got diagnosed by his daughter-in-law, who was a GP and who'd just seen a patient, and so she could tell him, "This is what I think you have." That was 50 years after he started having the initial symptoms. So, there's quite a long diagnostic odyssey. So ours, it was fairly fast, really, and fairly straightforward. Well, what we did is we didn't believe the first diagnosis that was given. In some cases, patients or parents actually, they might be told, well, it's absolutely fine, the baby looks fine, there's no problem, and then just forget about it. In other cases, we know of patients where the doctor said to the parents, look, they're fine as kids, but they might have a few joint problems when they're older, which is kind of underestimating really the extent of the damage. So what we did was just keep on questioning, and our GP also was good at that, was really persistent and kept on questioning. We were very alarmed when we got the diagnosis of alkaptonuria for Julian. We went straight onto the internet. This was in 2000, and well, there wasn't Google at the time. Went on Yahoo or whatever it was to kind of search for the disease, and we came up with all these horrible stories of black bones and joint deterioration and terrible quality of life and severe disability and all that. So we were very alarmed by that. And then it was only once we'd actually spoken to a patient who said, look, actually it'll take a bit of time for the kids to be affected and all that. There is still time to develop a treatment. That's when we started to become more hopeful. So the tipping point for us happened after the birth of our second child, Daniel, in 2003, and I spent the first few days after he was born just kind of like obsessively looking at the nappies. Are they black? Are they not black? And eventually, after a few days, they started to go black, red-black, and so I knew that he had alkaptonuria also. And then we had tests done, and they came back as positive. And I really started to think, well, what can I do about this? Because this is really not very good news, because the doctors were saying there's no treatment, or if there is a treatment, it's going to take years to get developed, etc. So I rang up a patient called Robert Gregory, based in Liverpool, and spoke to him. I found him on the internet, and he was very helpful. And he had just met a professor called Professor Ranganath, and they were setting up a patient group called the AKU Society. So we joined forces and kind of started from then. And at the beginning, I was doing things like running half marathons to raise £5 grand here and a bit more there. And we were using that to start with to pay for the autopsy of a patient. This was in 2005, and up until then, there hadn't been an autopsy done. And Professor Ranganath, or Ranga as we call him, was very interested in actually doing this autopsy. So we did it, and that really helped us understand a bit more how alkaptonuria, or the black bone disease, really affects people. The challenges are huge when it comes to rare disease. The first thing is just obviously the rarity of it. So alkaptonuria affects roughly 1 in 500,000 people. So that is really on the ultra rare side of the spectrum. We know of around 80 in the UK. There might be a few more, but that's the figure that we have. So the first barrier is the fact that it's so rare that you have to identify the patients. And so what we did, we got some funding from the Big Lottery Fund in 2007, and we set up an AKU information centre in Liverpool, and we contacted all 50,000 GPs in the UK with a short brief about alkaptonuria with some pictures of what it looks like, the black spots in the eyes and the black ears and the black bones and the black urine. And that helped us identify already around 60 patients. Before we did that, we knew of 4 patients. 2 of them were my kids. One was Bob Gregory and one was his sister. My advice to parents would be not to give up, that there is hope, that you really can drive things forward, particularly in the kind of today's era with social media and with all these kinds of things that can help you bring together the forces needed to actually treat the disease. And that there are opportunities out there and that there are potentially people willing to help, and it's worth looking for them. This whole rare disease experience has fundamentally changed us as individuals and as a family. And for a start, I'm now spending most of my time working on alkaptonuria and other rare diseases. Until the children were diagnosed, I'd never even heard of rare diseases. I had no idea there were so many and that it was so problematic. And within the family also, because now the kids are getting to the age where they're actually going to be going to Liverpool, having access to the treatments. They probably have to go onto a low protein diet to keep the side effects down, and they'll be on this treatment for the rest of their lives, but hopefully they won't develop any of the kind of damaging symptoms of alkaptonuria because they'll be taking it early enough. So it's changed life for them. And also it's made us meet all kinds of new people that we wouldn't have met before. So doctors like Professor Ranganath or Professor Jim Gallagher in Liverpool, patients like Bob Gregory, who was setting up the AKU Society, and also the wider rare disease sector. Kids just carry on as normal because the condition doesn't really affect them as children. The only symptom they have as children is their urine basically goes red-black. But otherwise, they're fine. And it's in the next 10 years that the damage might actually really start hurting them. And that's why they need to be on the drug as soon as possible. Julian is going to start taking the drug in a month and a half in August because he's now 17. Daniel is still too young to have access to the drug. So in a couple of years' time, then he'll be able to.